I didn't know it was laced. That sentence is replayed in my head more times than I can count, like a scratched record stuck on the moment before everything went wrong. It started as an ordinary night, the kind so unremarkable you don't bother to remember the details. A friend of a friend's apartment, low lights, a couch that smelled faintly of old fabric softener and spilled beer. Someone put music on, something mellow, looping, harmless. I remember thinking how tired I was, how my shoulders ached from the week, how all I wanted was to quiet my thoughts for a couple of hours and then go home and sleep. Someone passed me a bowl. I hesitated for half a second, that small instinctive pause that should have meant something. But I took it anyway, one hit, then another, because nothing happened right away and I didn't want to look like I was being precious about it. The smoke tasted slightly off, metallic, almost sweet, but I shrugged it off. Weed can taste weird sometimes, that's what I told myself. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The first thing I noticed was my heart, not racing, thudding. Each beat felt oversized, like it was hitting the inside of my chest with a padded mallet. Thump, thump, thump. I put a hand over my sternum and laughed weakly, saying something like, "Whoa, that hit me fast." The laughter didn't sound like mine. It sounded thin, stretched, as if it had traveled a long way before reaching my ears. Everyone else seemed normal, relaxed, talking over each other. Their voices began to separate into layers, like I was hearing them through different rooms at once. One voice was too close, practically inside my skull. Another sounded like it was echoing down a hallway. Then the room tilted. Not physically, I wasn't falling, but conceptually. Like the idea of the room had shifted. The walls felt farther away than they should have been, and at the same time crushingly close. The light from a lamp smeared itself across my vision, leaving trails that didn't fade. When I blinked, when I looked at my hands, they didn't feel attached to me. They were objects I was borrowing. "Hey," I said, or tried to. The word came out wrong, slurred and slow, as if it had to push through syrup to escape my mouth. Everyone turned to look at me, and their faces slipped. That's the only word that fits. Slipped. Their features didn't melt like in some colorful psychedelic fantasy. They slid, eyes drifting a fraction of an inch too low, mouths lagging behind expressions, smiles appearing a moment after the joke had already passed. It was subtle, just enough to be horrifying. I stood up, or thought I did. The act of standing felt like remembering how to stand rather than actually doing it. My legs responded a second late. The floor rippled under my feet, not like water, but like fabric being shaken from underneath. "What was in that?" I asked. No one answered right away. That silence stretched, elastic and awful. When someone finally spoke, their words arrived fractured, syllables stacking on top of each other. "Just weed, man." But by then I knew. Not intellectually, not in a calm, reasoned way. I knew in my gut, in the animal part of my brain that had begun screaming. Something had been added, something sharp, something wrong. Time stopped behaving. Moments didn't follow each other anymore. They piled up. I would blink and feel like an hour had passed, only to glance at my phone and see that 30 seconds had gone by. Then I'd stare at the same screen and feel trapped there for what felt like days, watching the numbers refuse to change. My thoughts splintered. One part of me was narrating everything in a frantic monotone. "You're too high. You're having a bad reaction. This will pass." Another part was convinced, absolutely convinced, that I had permanently damaged my brain, that I had snapped something delicate and irreplaceable. And then came the loops. I'd have a thought. "I need air," and stand up. Then I'd realize I was already standing. Then I'd realize I had already realized that. The same realization folding in on itself, again and again, like a nightmare gif that wouldn't stop replaying. Each loop felt identical, and each one carried the same terror, the fear that I would never escape it. My vision fractured into patterns, not pretty ones, jagged, angular geometry overlaying everything like broken glass. Faces broke into triangles and lines. The room pulsed in time with my heartbeat, swelling and contracting as if it were breathing me instead of the other way around. At some point, I ended up in the bathroom. I don't remember deciding to go there. I just remember the mirror. I wish I didn't. The person staring back at me was familiar in the way a stranger wearing your clothes is familiar. My eyes looked enormous, black swallowing almost all the white. My skin seemed too tight, stretched over my skull. When I moved, there was a delay, like my reflection was struggling to keep up with me. I leaned closer, gripping the sink. The porcelain felt impossibly cold, the sensation screaming up my arms. I opened my mouth to tell myself it was okay. The reflection opened its mouth first. That's when the panic detonated fully. My thoughts stopped being sentences and turned into alarms. You're stuck like this. You've broken reality. You are dying. You are already dead, and this is the last echo. I slid down to the floor, my back against the tub, and lost all sense of dignity. I was shaking uncontrollably. My teeth chattered so hard I thought they might crack. Sweat soaked through my shirt, cold and clammy. Sounds from outside the bathroom door warped into something sinister. Laughter sounded mocking, distorted, like it was being played backward. Music stretched and twisted, notes bending into grotesque parodies of themselves. The bass line felt like it was drilling directly into my spine. At some point, someone knocked. The sound of knuckles against the door echoed like a gunshot. "You okay in there?" I tried to answer. What came out was a sob. The door opened. A face appeared, swimming and unreal. Hands reached for me, and the sensation of being touched was unbearable. It felt invasive, like my skin had been peeled back and every nerve was exposed. "Don't touch me," I screamed, though in my head it sounded much louder than it probably was. Something's wrong. Something's really wrong. That's when someone said it, casual, offhand, as if they were commenting on the weather. Oh, yeah, that might have had a little acid in it. A little. That phrase echoed and echoed, each repetition hitting harder than the last. Acid, LSD. The word itself became enormous, filling my mind with images of melting brains and endless trips and people who never came back the same. I lost track of my body after that. I became a point of awareness floating in a storm. Sensations hit me without context: pressure, heat, nausea, fear so intense it felt like a physical force pressing down on me. I was certain my heart was about to explode. I could feel each beat stretching longer, slower, until the space between them felt infinite. In that space, I was sure the next beat wouldn't come. I remember thinking about my family, not in a sentimental way, but with crushing guilt. This is how it ends, on a bathroom floor, because you weren't careful. I tried to form apologies in my mind, but they dissolved before I could finish them. Reality began to peel away in layers. First the room, then the concept of the room, then the idea that there had ever been a room at all. I forgot where I was. I forgot who I was. I forgot that there was a me to forget. All that remained was terror, pure, unfiltered, cosmic terror. Not fear of something specific, but fear as a state of being, fear without an object, without edges, stretching in all directions forever. It felt like I had discovered a fundamental truth of the universe, and the truth was that existence itself was unbearable. I was convinced I had, insane, not temporarily, permanently. I'd crossed some invisible line, and there was no crossing back. The idea of sober felt like a myth, something other people experienced, but I never would again. I imagined myself institutionalized, locked in my own mind, screaming silently while the world moved on without me. Time became meaningless. Minutes felt like years. Thoughts aged and decayed as soon as they formed. I experienced entire lifetimes of dread in what must have been seconds. At some point, much later, I think, the intensity shifted. Not relief, just exhaustion. Like my mind had been screaming for so long it had started to lose its voice. I became aware of my body. Again in fragments, the cool tile under my cheek, the taste of bile in my mouth. The sound of my own breathing, ragged but still happening. That fact alone felt miraculous. The visuals softened slightly from jagged shards to slow, nauseating waves. My thoughts were still broken, but they moved again. Instead of spinning in place, I could remember my name. It felt like a victory. I was helped to a couch. The act of moving through space felt wrong, like I was being dragged through thick resistance. I stared at the ceiling and watched it crawl, patterns forming and dissolving in endless grotesque variations. Faces appeared in the texture, not smiling, not threatening, just watching. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I fell inward, tumbling through abstract horror, so I kept them open even though that wasn't much better. Hours passed, or maybe centuries. Eventually, the fear loosened its grip, just enough for something else to creep in, emptiness. A hollow, shell-shocked numbness. I felt scraped out, like whatever made me had been violently scooped away. When the sun finally came up, its light felt offensive. Too real, too sharp. I was still tripping, but weakly now, like an aftershock. The world looked flat and artificial, as if someone had turned the saturation down and left everything else broken. I went home. The journey felt endless. Every car sound made me flinch. Every stranger's face seemed loaded with hidden meaning. I crawled into bed fully clothed and stared at the wall, afraid to sleep, afraid not to. The trip didn't end cleanly. It frayed. For days afterward, I felt wrong, like I was slightly out of phase with reality. My thoughts felt brittle. Loud noises sent jolts of panic through me. When I closed my eyes, I could still see faint patterns, reminders of how easily my mind had unraveled. The worst part wasn't the fear itself. It was the knowledge of it, the certainty that my brain was capable of generating something that horrific all on its own, that hell wasn't some external place. It was built in, waiting for the right chemical key. Even now, when I think about that night, my chest tightens, my heart stutters just for a moment, a ghost of that thudding panic. I didn't just have a bad trip, I learned how thin the walls are.